Hi, friends, and welcome to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Keating. In this podcast, we talk about it all, our parenting, our partnering, and our professional lives, because they are all a part of us, and we were never meant to do this alone. Hello. Welcome back to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I am so very grateful and thrilled to have you here, as always. I think you hear me say that every week, but I say it every week because it is legitimately true every week. Really love that I have such loyal listeners to the podcast. And if this is your first time joining us, welcome. I want to give today's podcast a little bit of a content warning. And first of all, we'll let you know that if you have small children around you, this is not a child-friendly conversation. It may not even be appropriate for your teens to hear, although it's related to a conversation you need to have with your teens. You may want to have them tune out so that you can have the conversation rather than letting them hear it through the podcast. So with that warning being made, I'll let you in on what we're going to be talking about. So today on the podcast, I'm sharing a conversation that I had with my colleagues, Amy Lang of Birds and Bees and Kids, and Casey O'Rourke of the Joyful Courage podcast. And Amy and Casey are friends, colleagues, and like-minded folks. And I love sharing their wisdom on the podcast and love being in conversation with the two of them. And today is no exception. However, what we tend to dive into together are not always fun things to talk about. But they're so important. So today we are talking about pornography. Now, you have heard other episodes on the Heartful Parent podcast address the subject of pornography. But we're going to address it a little bit differently. As I said, this is a conversation. We all have children at different ages. Amy and Casey both have children who are grown and launched and out of the house. Casey still has one child, a teenager at home who is launching in the fall. And I still have a teenager who is at home for several more years and a 7-year-old. So we kind of bring that lens to this conversation, and like, how do we need to be talking to all the different ages about the issue of pornography? And I guess the first question, or I'm making an assumption in saying that, in that, yes, we do need to be talking to our children about pornography. And so if you haven't done it yet, it doesn't matter the age. If you haven't done it yet, or you don't know how to do it, this conversation is for you. And if you have a little kid and aren't sure when the right time is to bring this up or how to bring it up, we don't dig into that in detail today. But it is a critical conversation because our kids are being exposed to more and more online. So that's what today is all about. Pornography, the way that it's damaging our kids, how harmful it is to them, how to counteract it, how to be in conversation with them, and so much more. And I hope you enjoy it. I hope you learn a lot. And I say enjoy, I know these conversations aren't always fun, but I am hopeful that the dynamic between Amy and Casey and me will pique your interest and will be enough to keep listening, because this is an important conversation, without a doubt. As I said, this podcast was originally recorded for the Joyful Courage podcast, hosted by Casey O'Rourke. So what you'll hear is she's the one asking the questions here, but we are all thoroughly engaged and there's so much to learn. So without further ado, Amy, Casey, and me talking porn. Have fun.
All right. Welcome back, listeners. I am so excited. You are here for part 2 with my friends, your friends, Amy Lang and Christy Keating. I know I shared their bios last time, but I'm going to do it again, starting with Christy. Christy is the founder of the Heartful Parent Collective, which includes Heartful Parent Coaching, Savvy Parents, Safe Kids, the Heartful Parent Academy, the Safe Parenting Summit, and the Heartful Parent Podcast. Christy is a licensed attorney turned certified parent coach, positive discipline educator, and fair play facilitator. Christy serves as a board member for the National Coalition to Prevent Child Sexual Abuse and Exploitation. She is a fierce advocate for women and families and loves working with parents on a wide variety of issues, from behavior issues to balancing competing life demands. She loves helping parents and professionals discover newfound energy in their work, personal lives, and parenting. Christy is a strong believer that we are all, parents and professionals alike, deserving of support, and that we never go wrong when we lift another parent up. Christy lives in the greater Seattle area with her husband of 17 years and their 2 amazing daughters. And then we have Amy Lang, a sexual health educator for over 27 years. Amy helps parents learn how to talk with their kids about sexuality. With her lively, engaging, and down-to-earth style, she shows parents they really can become their kids' go-to birds and bees source. Amy is a certified neurodiversity and sexuality person. Oh, no, I got to say that again. Amy is certified in neurodiversity and sexuality and helps parents of neurodiverse kids tackle this important part of parenting. Amy is the author of 3 books and has online courses. Her podcast, Just Say This, reaches thousands of listeners a month. Amy is still married to her first husband, and they are getting the hang of parenting their recently launched man-child. She lives in Seattle, Washington, and you can learn more about her work at birdsandbeesandkids.com and bbkpros.com. Ladies, here we are back again for more conversation about good times.
Good times, Katie.
Good times in the parenting arena.
Parenting, passionately good times.
I mean, and what more would anyone want to talk about than porn?
Oh, man. Well, we already went through the sugar dating episode. So part 2, we're bringing the convo to porn. And I feel like, and I was telling you gals this kind of in our prep conversation, I haven't really talked about porn even here in the podcast in a while, but you guys you're still talking about porn, right? Because it's kind of Amy's.
We talk about it all the time.
All the time.
So what's the latest on the scene? Yeah.
How you doing, porn?
What's the latest? Amy, I'm going to let you answer that. What's the latest? Ew.
Well, I just actually took part in this conference by Culture Reframed about pornography and kids and impact and all that stuff. And it's bad. And
yeah.
I'm going to kind of go backwards here. Like I just really want parents to please believe us when we say your kid's going to see pornography. Like, please believe me, please, everybody, believe us. And it's just heartbreaking. And so do
parents still think their kids aren't seeing porn?
Yeah. They think they won't see it because
they
would
do.
They would never. My kid would never.
Oh.
And if they do, oh, well, so it's kind of, if they do, they'll stop looking. If they do, they'll tell me. And if they do, well, I saw it, so I'm fine. That's the worst.
Yes.
That's the worst.
Or if they know it's not real, so it's okay. I hear that one a lot.
Yeah. They get it. They have context.
Yeah.
They don't have context.
They have no context.
Unless you've been talking to them about sex, and then they still don't have any context because it's not real sex. So anyway, so I think that I'm trying to good news here. I'm not in a real good space about the good news about this. It's
there's no better trends. There's no since we've been educating people these past 5 to 10 years.
No,
I'd say there's a little, I would say there is a little bit more awareness, but if you looked at parents as a whole, I think that it's a lot of head in the sand still. I do think parents know, their big fear of their kids being online is that they're going to be exposed to porn, and that's as far as it goes. Yeah. I'm afraid they're going to see porn. It's sorry, this is great.
Yeah.
Have some words, Christy.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of good news in the space, frankly. And I'm sorry to say that, but I do think there are some families that are more aware. There are some, and obviously Amy and I work really hard to get the word out. The Safe Parenting Summit, with which you are both a part of in 2024, like we're working to get the word out in that, of, what it is, what to do, how to talk about it, et cetera. But I would say the overwhelming majority of families are either head in the sand or I don't know what to say, so I'm just not going to say anything and the kids will be fine, right? They'll be fine. And the reality is that the industry is bigger than ever. It is completely unregulated. They, like, the shit that the cigarette and tobacco industry was pulling 50 years ago, like that's kind of where we are with the pornography industry. They are intentionally hooking kids. And because that serves their bottom line. And so, the other thing I hear parents say, well, you can't get on those sites unless you're 21 or, which is absurd and so naive, because not only is it free in many spaces, but the most violent, misogynistic, awful parts of it are what's free. And the problem with that, and the problem with some of the excuses or the things that Amy was saying that parents have said, like, oh, well, I saw it, I'm okay. Well, first of all, it's way different than when we were growing up. But also, and I was attended the same or part of the same conference that Amy did, and Savvy Parents Safe Kids was a sponsor for it. And one of the speakers was talking about perceptual learning, and like, it's changing the brains of our children. So even if we try to give them as much context as we can, it's changing their brains in a way that can't be like backed up, really, can't reverse that real easily. So yeah, not a lot of good news.
Well, I just feel bad. I just feel bad for kids. I feel bad for parents. I really feel bad for kids. And sorry, I feel like we almost shouldn't have done this today because I'm sort of flooded and disappointed. But I don't want to be all gloom and doom. And so I feel like this is one of those situations where you do need to talk about it. You've got to do everything you can and say all the words and use all the products and do all the monitoring, filtering and all that, and talk openly about it, because that is all you can do. Yeah. That is literally all you can do. You're not going to be able to prevent the exposure. You can't decide how your child's going to react to it, because they're going to react how they're going to react. And so I guess it's like, okay, this is going to happen. Like, they're going to have sex. They're going to see porn. Let's get them ready for it. Yeah. Let's get them ready for it. Let's give them the best shot at it that they can possibly have. And so let's be here with this. But, one of the takeaways from this conference is how far behind. It's 2023. I already outraged it at Christy over this. It's 2023. I did to you, Casey. The people who do forensic interviews and work with children who've been sexually abused or are dealing with kids, like healthcare providers, they don't ask them, have you seen porn? A child is doing some kind of sexual acting out. They don't say, have you seen porn? And there are reasons for that. But the main reason is that they're chicken. It doesn't occur to them. Didn't even occur to me, one person said. Did not occur to me. And I'm like, oh my God, it is 2023. Where are you? You work with children. It didn't occur to you to see if the kid might have seen porn as they're acting out, the 4-year-old's acting out violent sex stuff with another kid, right? Sorry, reverse trigger alert, right? Like, where are your heads? Like, even in the profession, even where they're there for child safety, they're like, oh, right. Mm-hmm. Oh, who knew? It's like, I knew, but this is my universe, right? Like, right. Of course I think that. That's the first thing I think now when people say my kid is sexually acting out in some way. It's like, oh, they saw porn.
Well, yep. When I listen to you, and I think about, habit of use, right? It's not like, kids they're keeping it a secret. That's the logical thing to do if you're a kid or a teen and you're in the corner and you're in the bathroom and you're, having your porn time. And it's so, as a parent, you might not see it, right? It might not be any kind of acting out. So the important, so waiting for it to come up to have the conversation is a mistake, because they're going to do everything they can to keep it a secret.
I mean, adults keep it a secret, right?
Yeah.
So of course kids are going to keep it a secret. And also porn is in all sorts of hidden spaces that parents don't realize that it is, right? So, you're like, oh, don't go to, Pornhub, right? We've got Pornhub blocked on the thing, so we're good. Well, they are accessing porn in places that most parents would not even think of. And I've had calls from parents who are like, oh my God, my child has an Amazon Kindle, right, device, and is accessing porn on that. And not always visual either. Some of it is written pornography, like extremely graphic, pornography. It's in fan fiction, on fan fiction sites that, kids are like writing their own stories, and then seeing that, seeing or reading really, really graphic, not sort of run of the mill sex stuff that, you might see in a 40-year-old's beach read book, right?
Daniel Steele did not get into it.
Right.
They laid down and then it's the next morning.
Right. But Outlander. They got an Outlander.
Okay.
Or
don't even get me started on Jamie Fraser, because I kind of love.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, me too. Do you want to go to Scotland with me? Sidebar.
I did go to Scotland this last summer.
We'll talk about that.
Not because of Jamie Fraser, but
anyway.
So
sorry.
So, middle-aged women talking about a hot Scottish guy.
You never know what's going to come out when the three of us get together.
John Stamos. Right.
Here we go. Stamos. Oh my gosh.
Anyway.
Right. Well, okay. So let's break down the why. I mean, Amy, you said it changes the brain. I'm thinking about our kids having their first IRL sexual encounter. And if they've had a healthy diet of pornography, what are they expecting? Right? I mean, what's happening there? So talk a little bit about, do you know, like, what are the kids reporting as far as the ones that are reporting around like first sexual encounters? Is there a difference?
Well, if everyone thinks that, teenagers use porn as sex ed. So they think that they literally use it for sex ed. Yeah. So they think that's how you do sex. So you're hanging out with your first person and you're fooling around and you're making out and things advance. And then part of the initial early on sexual activity can include really violent, awful stuff, like choking and biting and name calling and all this terrible, terrible stuff. And so they think that's, they think that's normal because that's what they've seen. Somebody at this conference just said that she had a person, and I'm going to pretend I misheard her about the age of the person because it was too young. Which sex should I have first, front sex or back sex? Oh. Right? Like that shouldn't even be in the equation. So that's what they think sex is. And so one of the things you have to talk with your kids about, aside from talking about sex, is like the progression of things. It goes from hand holding to over the shirt, under the shirt, consent, and then maybe parts and holes. There's so much fun you can have without putting parts and holes, and nothing violent, right? No violence.
Yeah. No violence.
Right.
That's not part of being a learner. So, so they report that. The kids report that. And it's really hard. You can't unsee things. And like, Christy was talking about the brain stuff, but you can talk more about that. They get these ruts in their brain from using and watching it. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, how it relates to the...
Yeah. So, okay. So I'll give an example of this, but sort of, if we're thinking of what these kids are getting in their minds as sort of what's normal, what a lot of them report, to sort of build on what Amy was just saying, is that it is assumed that it is normal for, and again, this is in the context of a heterosexual relationship, but for the male party to ejaculate on the face of the female, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know a single 14-year-old or 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old that's like, yeah, I really want to have that all over my face and rubbed on my face. Sorry to be so graphic and gross, but that is what they are seeing in nearly every pornography clip, right? That's sort of the predominant thing. So they're getting this idea that that's what you do, right? That's what you do. And so one of the speakers in the conference that Amy and I attended had a really amazing, I thought it was a really sort of beautiful analogy. And he showed two pictures of, it was an x-ray of somebody's like thigh bone, your femur, right?
Mm.
And one was just the x-ray, and I'm looking at it going, yeah, looks like a femur. I mean, look at me, amateur radiologist, right? Looked like a femur. And then in the second picture, it had these red circles all over it. And he was actually a neurosurgeon who was giving this talk. And he said to a radiologist, they would take one look at that x-ray of a femur and know that there was bone cancer all over that bone, right? That there were these little spots because they are trained, because they've seen it over and over and over and over. And so their brain has been conditioned to recognize that and to see that. And that was his way of sort of describing the types of brain changes that we see, that our kids think, oh, I'm okay, or I don't, I have the context for this, or, I wouldn't do that. But when they see these images over and over and over, it is training their brain to see that as sex, to recognize that that is what happens in a sexual relationship. And especially in a brain that is not yet fully developed, right? Because the most recent brain research, and you've probably talked about this multiple times on the podcast, Casey, but the most recent brain research is showing that the brain is not fully developed. The prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until age 25 at best, sometimes later, especially for those of the, male gender. And so you've got an undeveloped brain. And the other thing that this speaker shared is that when we are in our pleasure centers, the prefrontal cortex is not engaged. It's turned off. And so, when your hoo-ha is turned on, your brain is turned off.
I love listening to sex educators use the word hoo-ha.
Which of course is not what we teach parents to do with their young children. But anyway, right. But when those pleasure centers are activated, the rational thinking that our kids, even with undeveloped brains, might engage in, it's not available to them. And so I think that's really important for parents to recognize that this isn't a no big deal thing, both because of the brain changes and because of the what pornography has become. And, if you asked any parent, when we were growing up, it was Playboy and Hustler and Penthouse and whatever. Most parents, I'm not saying all, but most would probably not have given their 11-year-old or 12-year-old a subscription to Hustler, but they will happily hand over a cell phone. And what the kids are seeing, like what pornography is today, is not what was in Playboy and Hustler. And, it's really different. And it's changing the brains.
Yeah, that brain stuff, like with the femur and stuff, that's really good. A really nice descriptor of how you can learn something. I like that. And they do, they just think they know, right? It's just terrible. Yeah. And then, the other thing is that how degrading it is to women, and then all the racism, and then all of the additional shit they're learning. They're not just learning how to do sex. They're learning about how to see women primarily. They're learning that people shouldn't have pubic hair. They're learning that a hairless hoo-ha is attractive. People with no hair on their hoo-has are children.
Yeah.
I want to point that out. No pubic hair equals child. That is not sexy. It's gross. That's just my personal opinion. And so it's teaching kids to be, boys too, to be ashamed of their bodies, of their natural growing normal bodies, because they're growing pubic hair. And it's the whole of it. It's not just the sex. It's this expansive, huge thing. And we don't want to get in front of it. And, Christy, I hear you talking about like the prefrontal cortex and all that stuff. And then the Hustler comparison and all that. Like, this isn't about you, but I'm fucking sick of saying that. I'm sick of saying that. Like, it's a point of reference. And maybe, I don't know, sweet listener, did that resonate with you? I don't know if it did. And if it did, do you believe us? Do you believe us? I mean, I don't know what else to, I'm listening to this stuff today and they're telling these terrible stories. And I'm like, ooh, should I tell parents that? No, why not? Because they won't believe me. They'll say, not my kid.
Not my kid.
Anything, any tale from the trenches, not my kid, not my kid, not my kid. So how do you help someone say, maybe my kid? Like, maybe my kid, yes, my kid, like, embrace this crappy thing that you can help. You can help. And I also think that one of the places that we can help folks like kind of come to consciousness around this is somebody was talking about, it was one of the panels, and this woman named Louise something, she was British, and she said that she talked to a middle school boy, and he said that he sure, if his parents talked to him, it didn't really matter. He knows what to do or whatever. But because when he's out on the playground with his friends, they all are looking at porn on the playground. And if he doesn't look at porn with them, he will be rejected. So we're sixth graders, right? They want to fit in. And so here he is in this position of, I should not look at this. I can't not look because I will be pushed out of my peer group. And so what do we do with that? Right? Yeah. Like, that makes me think we need to teach our kids how to watch it in public with other people and maintain face.
Or have an out that maintains face. I mean, I talk about that all the time, because there's all sorts of things that the group think, so how, what does it look like to say no? What does it look like to say no and still feel cool or whatever, right? To still feel like you're not being rejected. And I'm thinking about, I'm holding my listeners. I'm thinking about you and I'm hearing you, Amy, and I got a great listenership, right? They're tuned in. They might be like, oh God, I know.
I know you do. You do. But I'm also tired. I've been doing this for 17 years.
Well, and so it's horrible. It's horrible. And it is the reality, like we're saying. And that was something that you said, I think the first time you were on this podcast, which was probably like 7 years ago, was porn is harder to not see for kids today than it was for us to find as kids in the 70s and 80s. So that being said, people, we have to have conversations. So talk to me about, both of you, about, is it the same conversation for boys and girls? Where is it nuanced? Why would it be nuanced? I don't know. I think maybe it is though. So, okay. I'm engaged. I'm an engaged listener. Okay. My kid's probably seen porn, right? They're a teenager. Maybe we've had conversations. Maybe I did some work when they were younger because I heard that great podcast with Amy and Casey. And, I talked a little bit about it. And now there's a 15, 16-year-old. What does it sound like to engage them in the conversations about the exploitation of women and about, I can talk at my kids all day long. I want to know how to talk in a way where they can receive the information, right? And it makes a difference. What's the magic formula, ladies?
Oh if Amy and I had the magic formula,
I know we'd be so rich.
So damn rich. I think first of all, it's important to recognize that the conversations around pornography need to start much younger than parents think, right? They're estimating that the average age kids are first exposed to this online accidentally or on purpose is somewhere between the ages of 9 and 11. So, right.
It's earlier.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Of course it is.
Well, we think it is. Yeah. The research is, anyway, it's way earlier, right? And there are tools. Amy and I both have books recommended on our websites and all of that parents can use to kind of dive into this conversation with younger children. So obviously so I have a 6-year-old at home as well. The conversation that I'm going to have with my 6-year-old about this is going to look very different than the conversation I'm going to have with my 14-year-old. And that might even look different than the conversation, Casey, that you're having with your, 18-year-old son. And that might look different than the conversation that you have with a, 20 something, if you're still able to get them to engage. By the time I know that with my 14-year-old, she is she's my daughter. She is a girl after my own heart in many ways. And gets very fired up and passionate about causes, feminism, LGBTQ rights, like she is, and racism, right? Those are like three things that matter in a massive way to her. So what I've done is I figured out what's important to my kid, what her values are, and I've used that as an into these conversations, which I think is you can do in at any age, at least with the tweens and teens and above, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is you figure out what are their values, what matters to them, and then you use that as a way in. So for my kid who cares deeply about feminist issues and would never want to be thought of as a racist, then we can have a conversation about the racism, rampant racism that is present in pornography. And I can give you specific examples if you really want to go down that road. But like let's just say like light-skinned folks, even like if we're going to talk about BIPOC people, right? Black, Indigenous, people of color. So Black women on pornography sites, if they are light-skinned, they are talked about very differently than if they are dark-skinned. It's disturbing. And so I know that with my kid, that's a way in. If you have a son who cares very deeply about being seen as a feminist and being seen as a promoter of equal rights and, equality and, wants to be a partner in a relationship where there's equity in that relationship, then the misogyny present in porn might be a way into that conversation and the exploitive nature of it. But I think one of you said, I think it was you, Casey, like, we can't just talk at them. We have to talk with them.
Yeah. I mean, another thing too, I love all that. I think it's so clever, right? And one thing to remember is that they don't know what's happening. They do not know you have a plan. They do not know you're being clever. They don't know you've thought about it. They don't know you're being sneaky because they're so self-centered. Now, sometimes they do get on, like, oh, what are you up to? Oh, here she goes again, right? That can happen, but they're still really self-centered. So I love that idea of like figuring out their values. The other thing too is to ask them not about themselves. Just say like, I'm just wondering, heard these three amazing people?
Brilliant women.
Like women, these grown ass women who have crushes they have celebrity crushes. And just say, they were talking about this. Do you know what's going on with this with your friends? Or what have you heard? Never say, are you? Yeah. Have you? Never say. Because in that conversation, if you can stay chill and curious and say, just really casually, man, this can be rough stuff for folks. If something's going on, you can let me know, and then shut up. Right. This all dropping hints and using a peer-to-peer style communication style. Like you wouldn't, well, I mean, I would, because that's just my personality, but you wouldn't say to your bestie, what the hell, what's going on with the porn? Like, who's using porn? Is your husband using porn? What's going on with the porn? Right. Right. You might say, fucking A, like, what's the porn thing? Right. People are using porn. What's going on? It's freaking me out. Like, I'm worried. Do you know if your spouse is using porn? Like, you'd find another way to have the conversation that's gentler.
Yeah. Well, there's space to step in. It feels safer.
Yeah. And also sometimes you just have to say, hey, if you are looking at porn or you see porn and you feel weird or whatever, please just tell me. You will not be in trouble. Lots of kids have trouble with this. It's really common. It can really mess you up. Just let me know. We'll get you help. Right. You can also be straight up about it because sometimes they just need to hear those straight up words instead of pussyfooting around. Yeah. Or the ship has sailed so much. Oh, my kid's 16. The ship has sailed. The ship has sailed. The ship has sailed. There's nothing I can do about it. There's always something. I mean, again, like for me, like in my parenting life, it's like I tried to do everything so that I could say I tried to do everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And do you think that they're like, so I'm thinking about encounters, right? Like the teen first timers. And I'm also realizing as we talk that I'm really picturing the porn consumer as a boy.
Yeah.
And I realize that's not always the case.
They said 90% of boys have seen it by what, I don't remember the age, and 80% of girls. So everybody sees it. Do you know? I don't
Everybody
know,
sees it.
but
Yeah.
the users, the chronic users,
Yeah.
it's mostly boys.
The regular users do tend to be more boys than girls, but girls are at an increasing rate using it. And we also see that the LGBTQ population tends to have higher pornography watching than straight kids. And I think the explanation for that is because of the fabulous culture that we live in, they tend to be more ashamed of their sexuality, or they are not as likely to have an adult who's talking through those things with them, or telling them like, what does gay sex look like, right? And so they are trying to figure it out because nobody's talking to them, or it's not even okay to be who they are. So I think that's the explanation for that. It's certainly not that LGBTQ people are more perverted or whatever, for, that they're more inclined to pornography. It's just, I think that those kids are looking for answers,
information.
Frankly.
Yeah.
And that's really how this often starts for kids, is they're looking for information, right? It has become the go-to teaching, learning, experience for the overwhelming majority of youth. And we, as parents, play a role in that, right? Because we're not doing a great job in many cases of talking to our kids, or talking consistently to our kids. And so they are looking for, information. And then once they find it, then it triggers those pleasure centers in the brain. And then, it sort of snowballs.
Dopamine hit. Yeah.
It's a dopamine hit. And it really, like, I wasn't exaggerating when I said earlier that the tactics that the pornography industry is using really mirror what the tobacco industry used to do. And I think we need to see, and in fact, people that really exclusively work in this space, like Culture Reframed, which is run by Dr. Gail Dines, are saying, like, we need to see more lawsuits around this, because it's not a regulated industry, and
They don't care.
They don't care. They don't care.
So one little thing that did come out today during this conference was that there is a pretty bigger push to use age verification, and to use real age verification, where you have to provide an ID that proves how old you are. You get a digital chip that you have to use to get into Pornhub, to get into sites like that. So that's coming. In a few countries, they have that in place already. So you can't just go to Pornhub. You actually have to have a verifiable ID. And so ultimately we will probably end up there. But it's going to, as we should have, right? As we should have. So there's a little bit of stuff happening. It's going to get better, but this is one of those things where it is not upon the world to take care of your child. Like, this is absolutely one place where the only recourse is you.
Yeah.
You are the only protection.
Yeah.
Which sucks. And also is good, though, because if you want your child to have be a healthy whole adult, you have to talk about sexuality. You have to talk about this and how it can be so bad on their little brains and hearts and minds, and give them space for that, and give them education. And then, honestly, you have to use monitoring and filtering. I mean, I don't even, we actually have a colleague who will remain nameless, who says that it's, kind of why bother a little bit around the monitoring and filtering, which is absolutely, it's like getting in the car without a seatbelt. It's like ridiculous. It doesn't, it's not 100%. Monitoring is watching where they're going. You should have monitoring on every single device they can access the internet on, every single one. And filtering is like filtering out search terms and things and sites and all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah.
What are your favorites, just for listeners who are like,
Bark.
oh shit.
And Custodio.
Bark.
Yeah.
Bark.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bark is really good. It is a little tougher on Apple devices, unfortunately, than it is on, it works better on Androids, which is unfortunate, because Apple is so, they've got so many protections, but it's still better than nothing. And it's important that people use it. I want to mention something that just keeps coming into my head as we're talking about this, that really loops us back to our first conversation around sugaring. And I think one of the, if we want to address sugaring and we want to talk about relationships with our kids and why sugaring is not a good idea, we have to be talking about pornography, because pornography is teaching our children that sex is transactional, right? That it is emphasizing that this is not about relationship and connection, that it is simply about, as Amy says, parts and wholes, right? It is that it's transaction only. And so that I think the explosion of the pornography industry has laid the groundwork for the explosion of this sugaring thing. And for all of it, I, as a former prosecutor who, I spent years prosecuting sex offenders and sexually violent predators, I keep coming back to, why in the fuck are we not looking at this from a criminal standpoint? Because there is child sexual abuse material, which is the proper term, not child pornography. Pornography gives the illusion that it's consensual. There's child sexual abuse material on all these porn sites. And then when you look at something like the sugaring sites, it is illegal in most states to sell sex. And yet that's what's happening on these sites. I don't know how criminally this hasn't been looked at by the feds yet, but that's just a side note from my lawyer brain going, what the hell?
I love that connection between the transactionalization of sexuality and making it normal, right?
Yeah.
And in porn, we don't see, the way they see the porn, they're not paying for it. Nobody's paying, no kid's paying for it, because they, requires money. And the transaction they're seeing is just the sex for sex sake, right? And just seeing it cut out like that, it's just a thing, right? Like you said, quoting me, parts and wholes, it's just this thing we do. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. There's no emotion attached to it. It's just pleasure. It doesn't matter. It's just like a thing. It's like here's your glass, which what's mine going to be full of after this conversation? Just kidding. Where are you going, Amy?
Are we all meeting at a bar in Seattle after
this? And then we can watch me. Oh, if you didn't listen to the sugaring, you can watch my powers of seduction.
Then we'll see if you're full of shit or you really can't draw them in. We'll see. We'll see.
Sorry.
Oh,
Anyway,
man.
it's just rough, and I feel bad for kids and I feel bad for parents, but I can't stop believing that the more all of our work is so important. Like Casey, with your work with helping parents do better communication and connect and all that. And your same thing, Christy, and with the added bonus of the safety and the body boundaries and all that stuff. And then me with the sex talking, I just have to believe that this trifecta is gonna make it better.
Yeah.
And I have to believe that parents are going to believe me and you.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to believe us when we say this is a thing. It can fuck your kid up.
Yeah.
Believe us.
I do want to put a sprinkle
please sprinkle some glitter on this, would you?
Just a little bit of hope in here. So, it wasn't until the 90s or really early 2000s that body boundaries and safety and all the kinds of stuff that I teach on a regular basis became much more prominent, and was where we were talking about what child sexual abuse is, what it looks like, what the red flags and warning signs are, how to stop it, how to prevent it. And so that's fairly recent. If we think historically, right, that's fairly recent. And what some of the most recent research that is being done, and Dr. David Finkelhor is one of the biggest researchers in this space. And what he has shared, and he's also a member of the national coalition that I'm a part of. And what he has shared with our coalition is that gradually, and it's slow and it's small, but we are starting to see small decreases in the amount of child sexual abuse that is happening because parents are talking, parents are aware. there's been big exposés around, all sorts of Boy Scouts, the Catholic Church, you name it, all these big organizations, right? And now they're much more tuned into prevention. And so that's making a difference. And so the sprinkle of fairy dust hope that I want to throw in here is that as we all become more aware of the role that pornography plays in all of this, in healthy relationships, in sugaring, in child sexual abuse, and in just the mental health of our young people, I'm hopeful that we will eventually start to see similar downward trends. We're not there yet, but listeners, you have the ability to start to shift the trend, right? Like by believing us, as Amy said, listening and having these conversations, we can all start to make a collective difference. Because even if the feds step up and we have, the real age verification, and even if lawsuits start to make a difference like they did with big tobacco, that is years in the making. And our kids can't wait that long. So we got to start shifting it now.
Yeah.
That's I don't know if it's hopeful. I hope that is a little.
That's a pep talk. That's a pep talk.
No, thank you. I don't want to say anything else. I think that is, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And I do want to say something else. And actually, I'm saying something that I learned from my friend Amy Lang, which is short and frequent, people. Like, it's not one talk, it's many, right? And I love that side by side, keeping it, some broad strokes, create a safe environment where you're not freaking out. So your kids know that you can handle it if they do need to come to you, because they do stupid things, because they have teen brains. So they will make mistakes. You want to make sure, and Christy and I did a whole podcast about this. You want to make sure not only to do the preventative work on the front end as well as you can, but also to mean it and to have your kids believe it when you say, and if you get into trouble, come to me. I can handle it. I can hold it, because there's weird shit that's happening. Our kids are being targeted, and they don't see any out, and they're making decisions that are, ending their life. So on that note, thank you for listening to the podcast this week.
I'm going to go get some vodka. You want to go with me?
Oh, we love you, listeners.
Yeah, I do, like, there is hope here, and it is us. It's us. It's parents. Us. It's taking it, just do one little thing, right? I love my baby homework. One little thing today. What can you do? Go look at the resources that are in the show notes. You don't need to do anything else.
Yeah. Yep. They'll all be there. Listeners, check out the resources in the show notes. Before we leave, though, I have my final question. I didn't ask you during part 1. I saved it for part 2. And I'm laughing just because of the content that we just got passionate about. But what does joyful courage mean to the two of you?
Let's talk about joy. Amy, you want to go first?
No.
Oh, levity. Come on. This is my big question.
I think that, I can do it. I think that joyful courage to me means that having courage is hard. Like, being courageous is hard. It feels hard. And so if you can have some kind of anticipation of, like, if I do this hard thing, it's going to feel good. Even though it's going to be hard, when I do the hard thing, I'm going to feel good after I do the hard thing. So the space of the joy is after the courage happens. So that's kind of what that means to me. So if you do the hard thing of, like, oh God, I got to talk about the porn, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do it. And you do it. And then what happens? I did it.
Yeah.
I did it. Right. A little spark of joy. So how's that?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. What
Welcome.
about you, Christy?
I love it. Well, I think in the context of what we've been talking about, sugaring and porn, which is probably not most parents' favorite thing to discuss, courage is the thing that really, comes out for me as well in that phrase. And I'm going to steal a definition from a podcast guest that was on my podcast that I interviewed her just yesterday, Terry Schmidt, and we were talking about leadership, both professionally, but also in the family. And she said that, leadership is courageously making a way, or courageously using your talents or your gifts to make it easier for others to use theirs. And I think that is such a like fits so nicely with the idea of joyful courage, that we as parents are courageously stepping into our roles as parents so that we can allow our children to step into their power, into their joy, into their awesomeness. And I think that's what joyful courage is meaning for me right now.
I love
Lovely.
both of those. Yay. Well, is there anything either of you want to mention? You both have podcasts, you both have websites. All the links will be in the show notes. Is there anything in particular? This will go out before the start of the year. So Christy, if you want to mention the summit.
Yes, thank you. So I started running the Safe Parenting Summit that is for parents of kiddos from like toddlers to teens. Both Amy and Casey have graciously agreed to be speakers for the 2024 summit, which I'm so thrilled about. And we will be talking about all the different aspects of safety. So the way I define safety is really raising kids who are both brain and body safe, right? So all the positive discipline that we talk about, all the body safety stuff, and those will be married together in the summit. It will be the first full week in March. So March 5th through the 8th. And we just have some incredible speakers signing on. So people can find more information at the safeparentingsummit.com, but also Amy and Casey and I will all be sending out information to our mailing lists about this when you can register, which you can't do yet because we're just getting all the good stuff together. But I think that's would be a great next step for parents who are like, you know, how do I keep up these conversations? Where do I go now?
Yeah, beautiful.
I'm gonna plug her and then I'm gonna plug my own thing. So I have done over the years 1 million parenting summits, and this is the one that I have had the most wholehearted promotion and support of. It is absolutely terrific. It's useful. It's important. Christy has really good sense of who to talk to and get lots of information. So, I mean, do it.
Do it.
Do it.
Okay. Meanwhile, back to me. So I have something called the Porn Talk Info Kit, and there's a link in the show notes, and it is everything you need to have the Porn Talk. So there's videos with me, there's information about monitoring and filtering, there's I teach some stuff and then some other folks as well. So it's all you need. So it's at your fingertips, because this is never enough. It's never enough. So go check that out.
All right, ladies, thank you so much for hanging out with me. This was awesome, traumatizing, but useful. Thank you.
Casey, thanks for being willing to have these conversations.
Oh, yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I hope that conversation was handled in a way that made it accessible for you, that you were able to lean in and to really dive in with some thoughtfulness around this topic. I hope that you learned something. I hope that it spurs conversations after today. And I hope that it's something that if you are parenting with a partner, that you talk about with them and that you think about with them. And that we are all thinking about, you know, from a broader perspective, what is the world that we want to create for ourselves and our kids? And are the values that are espoused in the pornography industry, those values that we want to be bringing to our lives and to our world? And I think that's a question we need to think about. But more importantly, you know, wherever we are on that, how do we keep our children safe? And how do we give them space for healthy, loving relationships? I think that's the question for today. Hope you learned a lot. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll be back next week with another great episode of the Heartful Parent Podcast. Have a great week, everyone.